We're kicking off the first BWI Daily Recruiting Show edition since spring practice has started, and we have more news to get to than we could ever imagine. Ryan Snyder's with me. I'm Greg Pickel. We are talking here on Tuesday, March 22nd. Ryan, spring practice is underway. We're going to talk about the recruiting side of that, both visitors and things to know moving forward. But let me just start with this. A quick aside, you were up at spring practice yesterday. Penn State opened it on Monday, the 21st, for media members. Recruits were on hand, as we'll get into here. Recruits were in town over the weekend. And I guess my reason to bring all of this up is welcome back to some kind of normal that we knew before and haven't known for so long. It was nice to get out there, to see action in person, to see recruits being able to come to town and share social media stuff and all of that in a way that is not like it's been for the past 2 years. So just wanted to start there, get your impressions of that and anything you want, any final thoughts on what we saw yesterday before we dive into the recruiting news.
Yeah, I think going to the media room is probably the biggest plus, right? Because we've been to practice, but we haven't been in that media room. And when you do Zoom for 2.5 years, it just well, I guess it wasn't 2.5, but it felt like it. 2 years or so, it's it's just harder to ask follow-up questions and things of that sort. And I think it's just a much better setting. And yeah, so I thought that was good. Practice was what we've pretty much normally seen. I thought it was cool seeing the upgrades to Lash. I mean, it's still kind of more of a foundation than anything, but
Right.
you're really starting to see the outline of what they're trying to do there. And yeah, I think it was good seeing recruits at practice. I think we've seen a couple in
Right.
back in the fall. Like I remember uh, Rappleyea was at a practice. He came on like a random Tuesday at one point, right in the beginning of the season. But it'll be good just to kind of get back in that normal routine, man. I'm hoping that we get a few more practice availabilities here between now and the Blue White game. They're pretty good with that, so just keeping that going and yeah, just seeing life as normal. For me, normal is going to be like when I can go to camp again because that that
Right.
that was for me, that was the one thing that really changed the way I go about things. So that'll obviously come in June, and looking forward to it.
We're going to talk about the class of 2023 and 2024 in this episode, but just one other quick aside. It always makes me laugh the first day of spring practice, Ryan, when we see these guys who, compared to their high school peers, look like monsters. And then when they get into some of these position rooms with guys who are actual monsters, it's not hard to tell in most cases
Yeah.
who the guys that enrolled in January are and are going through their first spring practice.
Except for Drew
Right.
Aller. Like, I mean, he like his stature. I've seen Drew. I went to the All American game. I've been to like two or three
Right.
of his games. Like we have seen him a lot, but watching him out there next to Clifford and Vayu and of course Bo, it's he definitely stood out from a height perspective and a size. He needs to obviously get a little bigger physically, but from a height perspective, I mean, he looks different than a lot of the quarterbacks we've seen here in recent years. Nick Singleton looked great. Parker, I mean, going away from the freshman, Parker Washington. I was talking to T. Frank about that. I mean, he looked like I mean, I don't know what the word is. Just a freaking Bam Bam. Maybe that's a good word for it. Bam Bam. Just stout, man. But Zane Durant too. He's not the biggest guy. And I think that's really kind of what we saw next to some of those big defensive linemen that he's with. But
Right.
he's another guy who's pretty stout and getting a lot of good reviews. So it'll be fun to watch. Saw Caden Saunders out there moving well too. That was good to see. But yeah, looking forward to more spring access, man. And hope Blue White game will be here before you know it.
All right. Well, that was Greg and Ryan talking the current Penn State team. If you didn't get your fill of that, youtube.com/Blue White Illustrated or wherever you get your audio. T. Frank did 2 shows yesterday about the current team in the first day of spring practice. Lots of content at Blue White Illustrated as well. Moving on to recruiting, we're going to dive into this with the transfer portal. Penn State hosted 2 priority prospects over the weekend. Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, a pair of defenders and twins from North Texas who are committed to UCLA, but perhaps Penn State can make a late move here. These guys don't do interviews. Longtime listeners know that transfer portal guys generally don't. But at this point, Penn State, if it's going to make a move, it's probably going to do so soon. And those 2 guys were on campus for the weekend to check out what Penn State has to offer before, this decision ultimately is finalized one way or the other.
All right, so I've asked 3 people about it, and 2 of them said 50-50. And the other one said that, they feel good, but they didn't give me any percentages. But I have 2 people pretty much on record, not on record because, sources, but, admitting that they think it's pretty much 50-50. So that was Sunday. And now, of course, it's Tuesday. And, we, with yesterday being spring practice, I didn't ask a whole lot about it. I think the two things that people have mentioned to me are, one, UCLA has a good NIL deal for these guys. So they have to weigh the pros and cons of that. And then two, just getting them through admissions. And Penn State has been slow at times at doing that, especially with transfers, especially non-grad transfers. I've talked to people about if you're not a grad transfer, it definitely takes a little bit longer for that admissions process. And that's something when James always talks about as a university, and we need to all buy in as a university. I'm pretty confident saying that's one of the big things he's trying to hint at behind the scenes. So I think we'll find out here soon, right? I mean, UCLA, I think, starts classes here. Is it tomorrow or
So they have a
is it next
quarter.
Wednesday?
They run on a quarterly system. The quarter begins on Wednesday, March 23rd, but classes does not actually begin until next Monday. So there
Gotcha.
might be a little bit more time here than expected. But we'll note that because of that fact, they're going to have to decide sometime between us recording this a little after 2:30 on March 22nd and the end of the week. So if you're somebody who saves up your podcast episodes until the weekend or until your weekend drive, whatever, just note that you may need to check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the latest news on this, because it would seem likely that within the next 6 days, they're either going to be at UCLA or going to be looking at maybe Penn State or somewhere else. So keep an eye out there. But yeah, it seems like Penn State has done everything it can in this one. And it's just a matter now of whether enough is enough or not.
Both would be huge additions too, man. They need defensive ends, and that's what it looks like for these two. So I was going through their PFF numbers last week. When in the story I wrote, I think it was like late Friday when we put it out there, and I didn't realize how highly they ranked last year. I believe Grayson and Gabriel were 18th and 24th. I forget which combination of the two. Out of 222 defensive ends at the Group of 5 level last year, when it comes to pass rushing grades. And I know in Conference USA they were right up there at the top two. I think it was like 6th and 8th, something like that. Out of, I think it was over 50 or 60 defensive ends just in their conference. Of course, Conference USA isn't the Big Ten, but
Sure.
I mean, there's a reason that a lot of these schools really pushed hard for these two. So, I can't pretend I watched a whole lot of North Texas last year. I did watch a little bit since they came out. I think there was like a couple clips on YouTube I was watching, but yeah, I mean, it's very clear that these two are very important to Penn State, and they're still working hard to flip them. I just the best answer I have right now is that it is still truly 50-50. I think that there is a confidence in Penn State that these guys want to play at the big time level like this. I'm hesitant because I've had two people mention this NIL deal to me. And of course, Penn State's still kind of getting their collective deal together. I don't know any specifics as far as what they were offered or whatever, but just when I have people mention that to me, and especially with how much that is bubbling to the surface now of players, or how much it impacts players and their decisions, it grabs my attention. So they have to get through admissions too, man. And that's the other big thing. So a couple checkpoints there, and we'll find out soon enough. Massive additions though, if they can get them.
Certainly worth noting that with all the work Penn State has been doing over the last couple of cycles in the Group and 5, you and I should probably focus our fall gambling elsewhere so we can see more of these guys when they play. I don't know if we can maybe get a sponsorship for that. We'll have to look into that, but certainly we'd watch more North Texas if we had a reason to. So at any rate, Penn State, of course, has one transfer already on campus in Mitchell Tinsley, the receiver. We got to see him yesterday sporting Jahan Dotson's number 5. He looks good out of Western Kentucky. Hunter Norzad arrives a little bit later this year. So Penn State 2 for 2 in the portal so far. We'll see if they can make it 4 for 4 in the days ahead. Let's move on now on the BWI Daily Recruiting Show to the high school front. And we're going to start with a player who is committed to another Big Ten school, but has been open about the fact that he's going to check out some other places, and Penn State was recently one of them.
Yeah, Andrew Rappleyea. So
you notice that was my way of introducing that without having to try and say his name in case I didn't get the pronunciation correct this time around.
I said Rappleyea last week. It's Rappleyea. That's on me. So yeah, look, he was back this past weekend, and I did talk to Andrew briefly. I think it was yesterday, so Monday. And I mean, he first off, an awesome kid, and he's handling this the complete the way I would want my son to handle it, right? And he's very politely, hey, look, I have a lot to figure out here over the next couple days or next couple weeks. He's going to Michigan, of course, this upcoming weekend, and then has a trip to Boston College set for April 2nd. And I think once he gets through those 2 visits, we will know. I still think this is Penn State's to kind of lose right now. I really do. There seems to be a confidence in Lash. Of course, it's coming off a visit, so when the visit always goes well, right? And Andrew did admit that to me and we didn't talk. We just exchanged a couple messages, but. Yeah, let's see how this Michigan goes. This Michigan visit, goes this upcoming weekend because this is going to be their chance to sway him back. I mean, I still would be surprised if he ended up at Boston College. Personally, Boston College is I think improving in a lot of different ways, but I just this feels like a Big Ten battle to me, and the confidence that I get in Lash makes me think that this is a very real chance that he flips to Penn State in early April. But he's going to be quiet for the next 2 weeks, which again, as someone who's in this industry, I commend because a lot of guys they do these interviews after when they're committed elsewhere, and it just kind of creates more headaches for them than they really need. So I think it's honestly the right thing to do. And once he makes his decision, we will know pretty soon. I think by April 10th, we should probably know what's up.
In case you have followed, maybe from a cursory standpoint, Penn State recruiting so far in the class of 2023, the Nittany Lions have the nation's number 5 class, according to the On3 consensus, the number 1 class in the Big Ten, according to the On3 consensus. And you might say to yourself, wait a second, you guys are talking about Penn State adding another tight end when Neo Avery, a 4-star, is committed, Matthias Barnwell's a 4-star who's committed, Joey Schlaffer's a 3-star who's committed. You got to remember, Matthias Barnwell's moving down to the offensive line in all likelihood, and Neo Avery's flipping the defense. So Penn State in a place now that it wasn't previously where it will take another tight end because guys that they took commitments from at that position, they've now all agreed that a different part of the field is better for that player. So that's why you see Penn State making the move that it is here.
Yep. That's why I think he committed to Michigan because I thought at the end of December he was going to be in Lion in early January, and of course Avery commits on New Year's Eve, and everything changed from there. But as I talked about with T. Frank this past Friday, like the thing that Penn State feels really confident in is that they handled this all the best way they could and being upfront and honest the whole way through, and the fact that I have so many people telling me that just kind of hints to the fact that he was really close to committing, and that had to have been an upsetting. That had to have upset him. Where he was in that recruitment, and that's got to be tough, right? When you got 1A and 1B, and and 1A commits, and 1B feels like they're left out. That I'm sure that's not an easy situation to handle. As far as a relationship perspective, but they were open, honest. They made it clear to him throughout that they really wanted him to be part of this class, and that he just needed to be patient. And in retrospect, maybe he wasn't patient enough with jumping on board on Michigan, who was always, a firm competitor for Penn State. But I always thought Penn State was the favorite. So, like I said, what is it, March 22nd? I think if we don't know by April 10th, I'd personally be a little surprised just from the brief kind of, communication that we had on Monday. He said that in 3 weeks max, he really should know what he wants to do.
So that's something to keep an eye on for Penn State fans at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You heard Ryan mention that he had a conversation about this with T. Frank. You can find the BWI Daily, of course, at youtube.com/BlueWhiteIllustrated and also wherever you get your audio for the latest news. And of course, you can visit Blue White Illustrated as well, where it's just $1 to sign up for 1 year of access to BWI and On3. Check us out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Sticking in the high school ranks, we're moving to the other side of the ball, Ryan, the defense. 4-star Will Norman, who is from New Jersey but plays his high school ball at IMG Academy in Florida, is a guy who Penn State has been pursuing now for quite some time. He was back in town. The On3 recruiting prediction machine currently has Florida in the lead, but this recruitment is far from over. What have you learned about him at this point, Ryan? What made this visit a priority for him?
Yeah, I still think Will's pretty open, man. He came for the Illinois game back in October, and in the months that followed, it seemed really positive from Penn State sources that are where they stood. And then that kind of cooled a little bit. He took a visit to Florida in late January, and then the Gators kind of seemed to get a good foothold on him. He called. So he was back at home, of course, because IMG was on spring break. And before he went back to IMG, which I believe was Sunday, he got up to Penn State that Saturday. So that was a huge huge get for Penn State to get him back on campus while still in the Northeast. Of course, I should clarify, Will Norman's from Camden, New Jersey, so he grew up about 200 miles from State College. But for the most part, I don't see this one ending anytime soon. And the one thing that he said that really kind of grabbed my attention was that he wanted to commit before his senior season, but he wants to take official visits during the season. So, yeah, I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't think if he does commit before his senior season, whoever he commits to is not really going to want that. But he did say that he's certainly giving serious consideration to coming up here for the whiteout game for an official visit. If he's committed elsewhere and Penn State's full at the position, I don't think they're locking in that official visit anytime soon. They'll wait until August or so to see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, I don't see this one ending anytime soon. Now, with that said, he's definitely someone that they really want at this position, and they have a lot of options at that position. Of course, defensive tackle. I think it's definitely one of the deeper boards, and something that T. Frank and I will talk about later in the week when we go over the defensive offers boards. But just my impression from Will is that he still has a good bit of stuff to figure out.
So this is a recruit who, as Ryan mentioned, is one of many Penn State's pursuing along the defensive line. And yes, if you haven't read those hot boards, they're over at BWI, and they will be the topic of discussion later this week on a different episode of the BWI Daily. But we're going to keep the recruiting show going here on Tuesday, March 22nd, with another high school prospect of note. It's a busy time of year right now, right? So Penn State's practicing a few times a week, and the Nittany Lions tend to host prospects when they have practice. So you might see some guys pop up on campus when there is no practice that day, but more often than not, you're going to see guys in town when there is practice. But one guy who was in town over the weekend before drills began on Monday left with an offer. Ryan, you had the chance to catch up with him. Penn State is continuing to pursue offensive linemen in this class, even though it has a few committed already. Why was this player someone they felt like was one they had to offer?
Yeah, Nathan Afobe, I believe is how we pronounce his last name. He's from Georgia.
I'll keep throwing them to you for that. You can take a shot at it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was gonna throw it back at you there, but I didn't. Anyway, one thing that really stands out about him is the disparity in rankings, which really kind of grabbed my attention. On3 has him ranked number 85 in the nation, which means our scouts are incredibly high on him. I need to reach out to Charles Power about that. I obviously haven't watched Nathan a whole lot. He's from South Forsyth, I believe. Which is in Cumming, Georgia. But when you look at rivals in 247, they have him as a 3-star. So there's a massive disparity there. And one thing I need to kind of just learn more about. But I know Troutwine's been on him for a long time. Now, I think the first thing people would say is another interior offensive lineman. Like, does that really make sense? Given the fact that they have 4 guys committed already and 3 of them are pretty much guaranteed to be interior guys. I think it's just important to note that it's March 22nd and there's a long, long way to go. And clearly this is someone who Troutwine's been very high on. So I think that was the big reason why. And of course, whenever you can get a talented guy to fly up here from down south, you're always going to take him up on that opportunity. So I'll be curious to see kind of if he's able to come back maybe for an official visit. I mean, he did suggest that he was seriously considering that. Georgia Tech, Duke, NC State, Miami, they all seem to be firmly in the mix. Georgia has offered now, so I'll be curious to see how hard they come at him. The one thing I'll add here is that, Penn State's looking great on their offensive line right now, and that's obviously a good thing to be positive about. But I'm very curious to see how much NIL impacts this class, especially in the second half of the class. Like, one thing, this is, I don't know, maybe making predictions I shouldn't hear, but like I do generally feel that NIL, especially as we get into the season, is going to have a massive impact on how this 2023 class ends. And I do think that there's a real chance that a school or two could steal some of Penn State's commits because of that. And Penn State's working hard to get their collective together, and I think we'll hear stuff about that here soon. But either way, they're behind, and that's going to probably continue to be the case throughout most of 2023. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. I think that's a big reason why, even with 4 interior offensive linemen committed, they have to keep hosting guys, because schools are always going to keep recruiting players as it is. But when you add in this NIL element and you add in the fact that Penn State seems to be behind quite a few teams, I think it's going to be hard for them to keep everybody together at the very end of this class.
So NIL, something Penn State continues to work on, something you hear James Franklin talk about frequently, and Sandy Barber, I think, touched on it as well during her first news conference since setting a plan in motion for her to retire this summer on Monday. But it's not a light switch flipping kind of a situation where you can just turn it on and it magically works the way you want it to, how you want it to, with the kind of success that you can use on the recruiting trail. It's just not that simple. And to your point, there are many other schools. Eric Prisbel over at On3 covers this area very well for us. And I mean, you can go look up some of his stuff at on3.com if you search Eric Prisbel. And he has there's a number of schools that are out in front of Penn State. We've talked about this quite a bit here on the show and over on the forums and everything else inside the Lions Den, that this is an area Penn State has to get moving and get moving fast. And, they will. I don't think there's any doubt that they will eventually catch up, Ryan, but it's going to take some time. And that is an area I'm sure of concern for this coaching staff as we move into the summer with visits and then the fall with obviously as guys perform well on the field, NIL stuff can come their way, and it can come their way even before that, but certainly when they perform well, and it could be used against Penn State down the road if they're not in the same situation as some of the programs it competes against. So time will tell on that one. We'll keep a close eye on it, but at the end of the day, to Ryan's point, you're going to see the Lions maybe recruit some positions continuously. They do this anyway, but perhaps a little bit more so than normal, even though they have commitments at some spots already because of it.
Tennessee just got a 5-star quarterback because of it. And Nico Iamaleava. I'm not
Good
exactly
luck
sure.
with that one. I'm not even taking a shot at that. Yeah.
But I mean,
right.
Stuart Mandel came out with that story about the $8 million NIL deal and the $350,000 signing bonus and all that stuff. I'll bet anything in the world that that's Nico. And I'm pretty confident in saying that. Of course, he just committed to Tennessee yesterday. We know very well that Tennessee has one of the deepest collectives. All those SEC schools are ahead of the vast majority of the nation when it comes to that. And I think they'll always be ahead of the vast majority of the nation when it comes to the depth of the money that's in those collectives. So it's coming, man. I really thought that we were going to get through 2013 without being a major factor. And I still think Penn State can sign a good class in 2013 did I say 2013? 2023, excuse me,
Right.
without being a massive factor. I think that they can realistically get probably a top 10 class without it being the main thing. But in 2024, it's going to be all about NIL. It's going to be all about those collectives. It's going to be all about what you can offer, and if you can offer this, and School X is offering that. I'm not saying that's going to be the absolute difference, but it used to be about relationships, proximity to home, winning. Winning is always going to be important, and so were relationships. But the percentages of how important they were to these guys just took a massive tick down because NIL is going to be a big chunk of that pie.
Well, you mentioned the class of 2024. It's a good way to segue to our final topic on today's BWI Daily Recruiting Show. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel, and we are going to discuss now the new On 300 for the class of 2024. And we'll excuse you maybe just slightly if you missed these come out yesterday on Monday, March 21st, because you were too immersed in spring practice updates as Penn State football hit the field for the first time in 2022. But Ryan, there's one huge theme. Obviously, Penn State has one commitment, and we'll talk about him, but there is one huge theme going in Penn State's favor at this moment in the class of 2024 based on these new rankings.
Yeah, it's looking to be a great year for Pennsylvania, and I think we already kind of knew that. I didn't expect a dozen guys to be in that top 300 ranking though, which certainly caught my attention. Quentin Martin is on pace to be a 5-star. We've talked about this a lot. Of course, he's the athlete out of Belver. He ranked, I believe it was 16th in the On 300, and he's number 15 in the On 3 consensus. I mean, that is well within the 5-star range. They haven't given him a 5-star rating yet. They just kind of like to slowly progress and add to it, which I think is the right thing to do. As the recruitment goes on, but he's going to be a 5-star, and then that's he's going to be an incredibly important player for Penn State. Tyseer Denmark was also part of that. He's a wide receiver out of Roman Catholic. We had him at number 36 overall. Kind of too little. I mean, Tyseer's offer sheet is massively deep, so I think he's going to be a hard one for Penn State to get personally. Deshaun Dotson's a guy I need to get a little better feel for. He's a 6'4", 270-pound defensive lineman out of Newman Goretti. He was at number 67. I'll roll through these real quick. Deshaun Whittington, D lineman out of Ematep at number 150. Cooper Cousins, then, of course, Penn State's lone 2024 commit He was number 158. He's an interior lineman. Emilio Agard. This was actually a player I thought was a little low in the on-3 rating. We got him at number 204. I personally think that Emilio is a top 150 kind of guy, and maybe even a right around the top 100 or so. So I wouldn't be surprised if that rating moves up. He's number 86 in the consensus to give it some perspective. I've seen Emilio a couple of times now. I think he's the real deal. Trey McLeod, another EMTEP player. He was at, or excuse me, Emilio's not from EMTEP. He's from St. Joseph's Prep. I'm not sure if I said EMTEP. But then McLeod, then a good running back from EMTEP. He's actually visiting Ole Miss today. He was at number 208. Samaj Jones is St. Joseph's Prep's quarterback. He's the number 216. Peter Jones then is a really good interior offensive lineman from Malvern Prep at number 228. And there was Rico Scott at number 230. He's the wide receiver from McDevitt. We've talked about a little bit. He was actually just on campus this past Friday. Kenny Woosley is a cornerback out of EMTEP Charter. He was number 250 overall. And then Andrew Irby Jr. from Steel High was number 271. Penn State hasn't offered two of those 12 guys, and that's Irby and Samaj Jones. We know that they have some top quarterback prospects across the nation that they're targeting, so I would expect the Jones offer to probably maybe they want him to camp or something like that. We'll see. I do think Irby has a real chance to getting an offer. We have him at 6'4", 295. Of course, his brother, Alex Irby, is a pretty good quarterback prospect himself. I believe Nebraska has already offered Alex, so be curious to see how that plays out. The biggest takeaway, though, for me was the fact that Anthony Speca was not on this list. And that really surprised me because I've talked to Charles about him in the past. It's not just Charles's ratings. There's a bunch of people who get into that. We're not, to clarify, we're not really involved. I mean, I give my opinion on it, but at the end of the day, it's not like I have a say really in where they end up. But Anthony Speca, to me, the linebacker out of Pittsburgh Central Catholic, I thought he was definitely a top 150 kind of guy. So I was really surprised to not see him in there. And then David Washington as well, the wide receiver out of St. Joseph's Prep. He's another guy who I thought was probably around top 200 or so. He also was missing from the list. So I think that'll get corrected with time, man. These sophomore lists, I'm still kind of surprised that everybody in our industry is doing these when they are. I just kind of think it's a little too early, just my personal opinion. But I guess it's kind of if one person does it, then everybody else looks bad, right? If you don't do it. So I think that's just kind of the landscape we're in now. But to me, man, these ratings are going to get shuffled around so much. And if Anthony Speca and David Washington are not in them at the end, I would be really shocked because I've seen both of them now, and I think they're great players. I am confident in saying that Penn State has those two very high on their board for 2024.
One thing, just go back to the 2023 class quick. Thanks for T. Frank, who's pushing all the buttons and making us look and sound good today for bringing this up. We should have had this on the rundown. But Brandon Innis, 4-star receiver out of Florida, is going to visit Penn State in April. Just another sign of Penn State being willing to go anywhere and everywhere to find talent. Obviously, Florida's a place. It has really stepped its offer game up and its prospect pursuit up since Jaywan Snyder came to Penn State back in 2017, I believe it was. Man, it's hard to believe. It seems like it's that long ago. But, this is another guy Penn State has a shot at, and he's going to visit Alabama and some other places in April and get out and kind of see the country. So I know we didn't have that in the rundown. Any just quick thoughts either on him as a prospect, Penn State's chances, or just a general idea of getting a Florida player up here in April before the spring game?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be the only one. I'm talking to Damon Fagan today, his teammate, who's also at American Heritage, and I think he's coming too. So we've seen this before with these American Heritage guys. Of course, Fagan, Damari Brown, and Mark Fletcher came for the Michigan game. I think Brandon's just the first one who put it out there that he's coming. And Fagan and I have been talking a little bit behind the scenes the last couple of days because I'm trying to build these cornerback hot boards. And he mentioned to me the other day that he's looking at probably coming up for that week too. I was trying to get Damon on the phone before I read it up, and then Brandon tweeted it out today. So that would be huge to get that American Heritage group back, man. I mean, Mark Fletcher is another guy who's I know Jaywan Snyder has an awesome relationship with. That's the one thing people continuously keep hitting on. So they get him back again for another visit. Add in Brandon Innis, who we have him at number 28, I believe it is, in the on-3 consensus. He's a 4-star player, and he's a top 100 guy in the on-3 300 as well. So, man, he would be a hell of a player if Penn State was able to pull him. But every school in the nation's after him. He's going to, by the way, he's also going to Ohio State, I believe it is the week before. And then the week after, I believe he put it out there that he's going to go to Alabama. So He's taken, dude, Innis has taken 24 visits so far. Like, that is crazy considering there were
It's a lot
no
of
visits.
travel.
Yeah, it is. I mean, of course, I mean, you can't take that many visits if you didn't go when you were a freshman, I assume. So I assume he took been to Florida and a bunch of those schools, like Miami, a bunch of times when he was young. But man, that's a hell of a lot of visits. So it's great that Penn State is going to get Innis up here. I mean, you can always impress, and it takes one visit to impress. But just when I look at his visits and all everywhere he's been, it's not going to be an easy pool to get in. It's not going to be easy pool to get any of these American Heritage guys. But hey, man, it's a great sign that they're coming up.
No question about it. We have reached the end of this edition of the BWI Daily Recruiting Show. For Ryan Snyder, I'm Greg Pickel. Check us out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, $1 for 1 year of access. You can also find all of our video breakdowns, T. Frank's Daily, and Film Room, and much more at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, YouTube.com/BlueWhiteIllustrated, and wherever you find your audio. So for Ryan Snyder, I'm Greg Pickel. We'll see you next week on the BWI Daily Recruiting Show.